Hello, and welcome back to the Sherry Sylvester Show. We are taping today live from the Republican State Convention deep in the heart of San Antonio, and I'm honored to have my old boss, Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, who has just come off the floor of the main stage, demonstrating once again why he is the conservative North Star for Texas and the country. Because we're just 4 days from the runoff election, I want to remind you about the electoral feats of the Lieutenant Governor. In 2006, he ran for the state Senate in a four-person primary, won that primary outright with 65% of the vote. In 2014, he challenged the incumbent Lieutenant Governor, won the primary with 41% against three statewide elected officials, and he won the runoff with 65% of the vote. You know, I've introduced Lieutenant Governor a lot, and I have a lot of different stories that I like to tell about him, but my favorite description of the Lieutenant Governor comes from those pinko commies at Texas Monthly who described him this way a couple of years ago. Patrick's predecessors as Lieutenant Governor, Ben Ramsey, Bob Bullock, Ben Barnes, Bill Hobby, Rick Perry, have taken up the gavel and used the power of the office for good and for ill, but arguably none of it more efficiently or ruthlessly than the Lieutenant Governor. His predecessors are not in the same league, the same universe, the same galaxy as Dan Patrick. Governor, thank you for coming by and joining us here today.
You bet. We should explain when you say your former boss. No one is your boss. Sherry was I'm looking to the camera here. She was my senior advisor and helped with all of our communications. And she was brilliant. So it's a team effort. So there's no such thing as a boss, especially with you.
Well, thanks for that.
We were sorry to lose you, but you've gone on to much bigger and better things.
Yeah, but stardom. Total stardom.
There you go.
Well, I know we're getting you off a big, like Superman flying around the world backwards. I saw you on TV standing behind the former president.
Yes.
What was that like, that whole courtroom experience in New York City?
You don't ever know what to expect when you go somewhere that you've seen on television because it's always different. When I got there, the first thing we did was go into a room where he could meet with his attorneys and people who were there to support him, like myself and a few others. First of all, it was a dingy dump. You know, he's the former president. I know these are old buildings in New York. That city's been around a long time. They could have cleaned the place up a little bit, a little respect. Number two, the judge was just unbelievably biased. Because it's not televised, you can read the transcripts and you hear what the talking heads say on the news about it. But to actually watch him in action, he talks very softly, he smiles, he greets the president, Mr. Trump, and his attorneys, and then he just hammers them on everything. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a judge. I did the impeachment trial, and I studied a lot about that, and one of the areas that I studied was jury instructions, and both sides present to the judge at the end of the trial their suggestions for jury instructions. And the prosecution side, which is really not Alvin Bragg, it's Joe Biden and the Justice Department, they had maybe 20 items. I think they got all 20 of their suggestions. The Trump side lawyers, I don't think they got 1 out of 20. And they were, even for myself, I understood these are things a jury should know. There's no crime, there's no evidence, there's nothing here to see. But the judge has set up the jury instructions, Sherry, to make it easy for a jury of 11 Democrats and 1 Republican, I think is the makeup. That's the first time I'd seen the jury as well. He's made it easy for them to convict. And after, when you have let me just close with this. When you have a witness who lies and has been sent to jail for lying, Michael Cohen, who admits on the stand he stole money. I mean, why aren't there charges out against him? He stole $60,000 from the press. He's a liar and a thief. And the juries, I know in the impeachment trial, if you believe the witness is lying on one thing, then you can choose to believe he's lying on all things and take any of his credibility at all for anything. So this should have been declared, a mistrial 2 weeks ago, or the judge should have shut it down. No, they're marching for a conviction. That's what they want.
Well, I know you're friends with former President Trump, but why did you decide to go? Why did you believe that it was important that you be standing there and we have that image of you, which is another historical image? Why did you decide to be up there?
So, to be honest with you, I didn't know we could. And then Ken Paxton went several weeks ago on his own. And I thought, that's great. I talked to Ken. I said, Ken, how did that all work? He said, well, I just called the president. And he said, sure, come up. And so once I knew we could, then I did the same thing and just proceeded to want to go up there. And one of the things Ken said to me, which resonated, he said, look, there's nobody in the courtroom for him. Look, Donald Trump is the president, I'm the lieutenant governor. We have that relationship, but he's my friend, and you stand with your friends. And so that really resonated with me. And so, I called the Trump team. I believe in following protocol. So I called him and said, look, how do we do this? And we worked it all out, and this was the time I could go. I've been very busy in all these runoff elections. And it was actually a good day to be there because I saw some of the trial, and then I was there for the jury instructions, which everyone else would have found boring. But since I'd had the impeachment trial, I was really listening to every word. I'm a good listener, as you know, and I really, in the impeachment trial in the Senate last year on Ken Paxton, I listened to everything everyone said. So I was really listening to this judge, and what the Trump team asked for was not unreasonable at all. And so that's why I went. There were some other congressmen up there, but when we came back for the afternoon session, it was just Don Jr., Pam Bondi from former AG of Florida, and myself. For that afternoon.
So you didn't just stand there for the picture. You got to go in and see the trial, because I don't think people know that.
Yeah, no. I was on the front row for both sessions, next to Don and Pam, and no, that's the reason. You don't see that because it's not televised. You see the people behind the press gaggle. So he comes out, and there's a picture you'll see of his attorney himself and me in it. It looks like I'm the other lawyer, because when we came out of this dumpy room that everybody was in.
Right.
He said, well, it's time to go into court. So he walks out. I just followed the president and his lawyer, but nobody followed me. So they were all like waiting for instructions. And so suddenly there's this picture of me just standing there. The three of us is a great picture. It's like I'm listening in and giving instructions. No, I realized that there's nobody else behind me here. And then the rest of them came out, and then he goes up to the front rail. Then you have to be like 15 feet back. And then you walk into the courtroom, and they tell you where to sit. And then the Trump team wanted myself and a few others on the front row. And not that we're on camera, but just because if you're on the front two rows, you can use your phone. If you're not, you cannot. So it allows you to text.
Well, just one more question, because we have been watching the trial,
Yes.
but we haven't been in the courtroom.
Yes.
You said you looked at the jury.
Yes.
10 seconds, what was your impression? We know they're New Yorkers.
Yes.
And, sometimes you can kind of tell by style. Or what were you, any perceptions?
There are a few more women, as I recall, than men. I think it's a few more women. I was watching their eye, like watching a tennis match. Were they looking over at the lawyers and then looking at the witness? Or were they just looking straight ahead like they've already made up my mind? Yeah. I would say, they weren't like, I'm really not interested. I'm done with this. And so I would say half of them I thought were paying attention and the other half were not. But, sometimes people can just be staring straight ahead and listening intently. I mean, I do that sometimes. So I think most of them were engaged. And I would say, look, this shouldn't have ever been brought. There's no crime here. But what they're trying to present to take 2 misdemeanors and turn it into a felony, I mean, they're bending over backwards to try to find something to do. They've made it complicated on purpose, the prosecution. So it's complicated. And I think, some of these people, how much do people know about campaign finance law? Nothing. And the judge wouldn't let the witness who was going to explain that to explain it and say that President Trump had done nothing wrong under the campaign finance law. So
it's not a state crime either.
No, it's not. No, this is not a state crime. And so I pray that there are at least one, so we have a hung jury. He should be acquitted. We'll see. Next week they'll get the closing arguments on Tuesday and Wednesday, I believe.
Yeah. I really hated that they let the jury go home.
Yes.
I mean.
Yeah. Don't look at your phone. Well, wait, somebody's pinging most people every 10 seconds.
Right.
You know, look what flavor ice cream I just got. And by the way, I think you should convict him or whatever, you know?
That's where my alarm clock is. That's how I get up. My phone goes off.
Yeah, mine too. And so don't watch television. Don't talk to family. Don't talk to friends. Don't read anything. It's almost impossible. But I do think, the one thing I will say, Sherry, and I found it in the impeachment trial for most, when they get on a jury, they take it seriously and they'll do their job. But in this case, look, this was an appointed judge. You know, this jury, you know, there's obviously going to, I believe, a bias here towards the defendant, Donald Trump. And I hope if they do the right thing, they'll acquit him. If they don't acquit him, that means they use their political bias against him. And who knows what pressure they're getting on from Democrat influencers and political types that you got to convict him. We can't possibly acquit him. That would be the end of us. I mean, you can imagine that.
Right, yeah.
Shouldn't happen, but good.
And we know that the media is divided so much that who knows what kind of information that they're getting. I mean, I would try every day to watch MSNBC, watch CNN, so you've got an idea what the counter narrative is. Yeah. And it's
I'm
pretty
hoping
wacky.
there's two lawyers on that on the jury, I believe. I detected it. I saw a few people that I thought were like not buying the prosecution. Again, we only saw the one witness, Costello, at the end. But you go back, any reasonable person listening here, if you have a witness, the key witness for the prosecution, and they've already been convicted of lying, they've been convicted of perjury, they've lied to Congress, he apologized for lying to Congress, he stole $60,000. I mean, it's like, I'm not even paying attention to just as a juror myself, it's like, I'm done with you. Anything you say, it may be interesting, but you have no credibility, and this is a high bar, beyond a reasonable doubt. So if nothing else, you've given me doubt. Michael Cohen's given everybody doubt, so that alone he should be found innocent.
Right. Well, I know now, so Trump came back to Texas. You came back to Texas with Trump. And have you been campaigning? Has he been fundraising? What's been happening here? Because I want to get to what you see now 4 days out from the runoff and how the kind of the state of the campaign.
So the first thing that's interesting, because when we left court, I counted up last night. I got here about midnight in San Antonio from Houston, Dallas earlier. In 48 hours, I spent 23 hours with him. I've been in 5 motorcades, 3 business meetings with him, 3 speeches, and just a whole lot of personal time. I mean, we flew back Tuesday night, and there were some staff on the plane, but it was just the 2 of us, basically, and staff. And so we had almost 4 hours not that we're talking the whole time. And you know how you tell your children, don't speak unless spoken to sometimes? I don't speak unless he's the president. And if he needs some private time, he needs reading, whatever. And he had to work with his staff a lot. He has to catch up on the day. Remember, he's been in court all day.
Right.
So he's trying to catch up on the news. But we talked a lot about a lot of things. And, the guy just keeps coming. His spirits are always up. And, he's doing this for the country. So we came back yesterday. We did a luncheon. He's fundraising. We did a luncheon, a couple of round tables where he sits and listens to people in different industries. It's really good stuff. And then he spoke, and then we got on the plane, and we went to Dallas and did the same thing, and then he went to New York. I can't wait to see the Bronx rally tonight. I mean, he's doing a rally in South Bronx. I think there's going to be a big crowd, and I think they're going to love him like everywhere else.
Yeah.
I do. Now, there are going to be some protesters trying to just, disrupt it. I think there's going to be a big crowd for him tonight. It's like New Jersey, 100,000. Now, I don't know if it's 100,000 people tonight, but if they have 5, 10, 15, 20,000 people in an area that's a republic hasn't been in 100 years.
Right, yeah.
That'd be amazing.
Down in Wildwood. You've been down there.
Yeah.
It's bleak. It's blue and bleak.
It's blue and 100,000 people. I believe, Sherry, he's ahead in the polls in almost all the swing states. If the election were held today, he'd win. I believe he's going to do better than whatever the polls say, because I think there's an anger in this country. People's lives, inflation has impacted just simple things like taking your family to a fast food place and going to the grocery store and what you buy and what you could do if you can afford a vacation and all of those things. I mean, inflation is terrible. It's corrupt. It's a tax. It's the Biden tax. And then we got the border issue. I said this on the stage in my speech earlier. His last year in office under President Trump, we apprehended 342 military-age men from China. 342. Last year, we apprehended 22,000, and we've already apprehended 27,000 this year. That's 50-some thousand, and we still have 7 months to go.
Yeah.
From China. They're building it. You could argue they're building an army. I mean, these are fit-looking young, and you don't get out of China unless they let you.
Right.
So, he's going to the Bronx tonight to tell a story. He hasn't taken a vacation forever. He plays around the golf when he can. That's his break. But he goes, and he does it for the country. Sherry, I said this to him. I don't know if I said in the speech or to him. I said, Mr. President, when you came down that escalator, I don't know if you realized what you were getting yourself into, but you're the man standing in the gap for the country.
Right.
There's no one else that we could have nominated. And there's some good people, would be good presidents, but there's no one else who will go in and get this thing turned around as fast as he will.
He is such an asset to the country, such an asset to our party. Let's wrap with this.
Okay.
And I don't want to ask a tough question, but on Tuesday, we're going to vote.
Yes.
And
voting now.
Voting now. If you haven't voted, go out and vote. How, and we got bitter races in this building. You're involved in some really bitter fights.
Yeah.
What do we do on Wednesday?
So I said at the closing of my speech here at the convention, when this is all over, everybody needs to take, 30, 60 days during this June and July and dial down. I haven't stopped either for 2.5 years. I did my 133 city bus tour that you were on a number of those days, went right into an 11-month session, had Christmas. And then you come right back in January and you start these campaigns in the primary. This is unprecedented. We've never had 9 or 10 runoffs of very big races, including the speaker. A speaker has not lost a primary in 52 years. And, March 5th, he finished second. So already he's that. And we'll see what happens Tuesday. But I think it's likely that we'll see a change in a lot of these races. We've already had 9 quit in the House, who didn't run. 9 were defeated on March 5th, and you have 8 or 9. You could see another 8 or 9 go down, and maybe 6 or 7. I'm not exactly sure. Turnout's always low, so some things can wobble. The polls can look here, but if turnout is low, it can impact a race. But what I said today was, we're not the enemy. The Marxist left wants to take over this country, and they want to take Texas down. And so we have to stand it. So when we leave here, we need to leave and be unified in the fall for our party. We can't, it's like on the national scene. The Nikki Haley people need to come over and support Donald Trump. And Donald Trump, needs those voters. Those voters to win. But we have to come together. Joe Biden is destroying our country. I mean, we will lose our country if he's reelected, or any Democrat is reelected. If he's not on the ticket. I'm not so sure they won't. I'm not so sure, Sherry, the June 27th debate wasn't set up by Democrats so that he would be a failure to where they could go and say, look, we got to get this guy off the ticket.
Right.
We'll see. But, if he can just, walk and chew gum at the same time for 5 minutes, so, he probably will get a, rave review by somebody. So we have to unify. And I told the crowd, I said, look, primaries, that's part of the process. No one gets anointed or appointed to an election. You have to go through a primary. I've been through a lot of tough ones. It's a tough business. And if you're not ready for it, then you probably shouldn't get in the arena. Yeah, and I've never personally attacked anyone. I just talk about people's records. And that's the way I believe. You talk about a person's record. But at the end of the day, Sherry, we have to come together. And if you and I were on the opposite side, okay, your person won. Hey, how can I help them be successful? And if my person wins, you need to be saying to me, and of course we do, but I'm saying to two people out there, like you can be fighting cats and dogs, you're handing out leaflets at the polls. Hey, here's my guy, here's my push card, and here's my guy, and that's your neighbor down the street on the other side. When it's over, you guys aren't enemies or ladies. We're on the same team.
Exactly. Lieutenant Governor, thank you so much. If you haven't voted, get out and vote. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Sherry Sylvester podcast. You can get this podcast on Apple or Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. If you want to get my newsletter, sign up at www.texaspolicy.com/9th in Congress.